Okay, folks, so I'm just going to give it another couple minutes before we get started. So we'll probably get started around 1:35 with the presentation. So feel free if you need to run away and come back, you're more than welcome.
Hello.
Hello, how is it going?
Hi.
Yeah, I was just saying that we were going to give it until 1:35 before we started.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, no problem. Although I'm here, so I'm just want to make sure that anybody else that wanted to join has the capability of doing so before we start. Do you have any questions or anything that you kind of are hoping to learn or get out of this particular session?
I don't have any questions yet. Maybe later with information. Well, I'm hoping to learn mainly do you need to hire a professional, especially in social media.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll definitely provide some insight for that. And we are more than willing to provide recommendations as well if you have questions down the road.
Okay, perfect. What's your name? I'm sorry.
My name is Ryan Saltz.
Ryan.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
Ryan.
change that in the view finder. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Of course. Okay. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. I just fed my dog, so he should now leave me alone at the same time. Let me go ahead and change my name in this particular session as well, just so that you need to address me, more than welcome to. We are also streaming this session through Facebook Live. So if, when we take some pauses, I'll flip back and forth just to see if there are any questions there as well. But today's session is a part of our Launch Online series. And the purpose of this series is to help provide some insights for entrepreneurs that are looking to sort of get their business online. And one of the areas that I think is always kind of hard to figure out is when to hire a professional to provide services. So if at any point you have questions or you want me to stop or address anything or comments, whatever, just feel free to go ahead and either interrupt me. You can either unmute or you can drop it in the chat. Either way, I'll do my best to provide some insight. So my name is Ryan. I'm the director of Launch SA. Launch SA is a private-public partnership between the city of San Antonio and Lift Fund, which is a nonprofit micro-lending organization. So they help people that are potentially looking for capital. And when I say capital for them, I mean more so on the loans side. So if you have questions regarding that, Lift Fund is always a really great resource. I recommend to have that initial conversation with. However, Launch SA sort of operates to a slightly different tune in that we focus mostly on the business support side of things. Our goal is to support entrepreneurs in and around the San Antonio area. We provide direction, sort of like helping you identify the next paths along your journey. We also provide education, such as the session today. And then we also have two other elements, mentorship and community building. And so one of the biggest components I think that's important for any entrepreneur's journey is to build a community of like-minded individuals around them. Doesn't necessarily mean you have people that are going to say the same things that you say, but ideally other entrepreneurs are in your circle and network, and you're conferring with them on a relative frequency so that you can sort of compare notes, if you will. We've seen that those that utilize both mentorship and engage in the community are more likely to be successful than those that attempt to do things sort of in that individualistic or independent sense. So I just wanted to start with that. But yeah, we'll go ahead and move into the presentation. And it's ideally a pretty straightforward presentation. So if anybody has questions or problems, just let me know. So I think this is really the most important question that people can start with, and that's, do I really need somebody to do this for me? And when you think about hiring a professional, I think there's a lot of considerations that need to go into that. For each person, it's going to be somewhat dependent on the situation that you're in and the available money that you have in order to put towards a specific task or opportunity. But the three, I think, most important considerations in hiring anybody and really evaluating whether or not you can afford to have somebody do this for you. The first one is what is called opportunity cost. And if you're unfamiliar with that, it's sort of a businessy term, but the basic idea of it is just, it's the cost of spending time on something versus the value of doing something else. And so, if you're thinking about hiring somebody, maybe you already manage your social media or you already manage your website updates, and maybe you have the skills and talent to do those things fairly well. But when you're focused on the sort of what some people might think of as menial tasks within your business, are you utilizing your best attributes to help move the business forward, right? You may be very good at social media, but in the broader scheme of your business, you're a better salesperson or you're better at managing the operations. And if not, then also, that's another good point to say, you want to try to align what you're best at within your business with what you do, and then try to find people that can support the areas that you're not as strong in to aid the growth of the business overall. So if you find that you're not very good at accounting, for example, the value of getting somebody that can take that process and turn it into something that takes far less time is going to be more valuable than you spending double the amount of time and having less efficiency at it. So thinking about your skills and inventorying them, and really even inventorying the skills of the people that you may already have working with you, whether those are contractors or employees, or even just, I know a lot of times we get started with sort of friends and family. Understanding where their strengths lie and ideally trying to align those strengths and efficiencies towards the roles and responsibilities are going to help you understand really where the opportunity exists for you to find somebody to do something better. And so that opportunity cost, again, if you know that you're not the best at social media, and you're spending 3 or 4 or 5 or more than that hours per week setting up a schedule or trying to manually post, if your photos are not necessarily the most vibrant, or you struggle with figuring out the language behind each post and what you think is going to effectively work, then in that case it may be better suited for somebody else to manage to that specific set of tasks. And we'll get into what the value of that should be a little later in the presentation. The next most important part, I think, and I've already sort of touched on it a little bit, is this idea of skills and ability, right? So what are your strengths and weaknesses, and understanding the inventory of what you know that you're good at, and what you maybe enjoy to do versus what you maybe are doing, right? So there's also a component in there that I think needs to be understood, that you may be very interested, or it may be sort of creatively invigorating to focus on a specific task. However, you also need to understand where your strengths versus the sort of satisfaction of that creativity come together in you producing the best work. And so that sounds like a sort of a complicated way of really saying it, but I'll give you the example of, let's say that you're a chef at a restaurant, to a restaurant, and you really originally got into this business because you are very good with food. You're extremely interested in putting together flavors that other people haven't had before, and you're like, that's where you feel most excited, is in the kitchen, and seeing people's faces light up when they're brought that specific special dish. That may be something that you're both good at and you really enjoy. However, because you're the business owner, in order to scale the business and create better value or livelihood for yourself, sometimes you might find yourself not necessarily unsuited for a particular position, but you may be you may be spending too much time in a particular position for the benefit of your business, right? Especially if you're on that sort of creative side, or you get a lot of satisfaction out of certain aspects. You can get sort of enveloped by all of the excitement, and you end up spending more time than you really need to on a specific thing. So in that case, if you find yourself in that position, I think there's a couple of directions you can go. Number one, I think, would be to really set standards and schedules for yourself in terms of time management. Understanding how much time that you have, and really sticking to the time allotted for specific tasks can really help you ensure that you're giving proper attention and focus to all aspects of your business. And when you start to equate that time that you spend to money, then you start to realize how much more money you could make if you spent more time on tasks that move the dollar signs forward and less time on the tasks that don't necessarily. Because sooner than later, you realize the day is over and you've spent a lot of time doing something that didn't exactly help the business move forward. So it's important to think that way and sort of step out of the mindset of the creative or the person, maybe the interest that got you to the point of wanting to start the business, if it was on a more creative side, if you will. And then also to spend a little bit more time sitting in the shoes of the owner. At the end of the day, you start a business. Some people do start businesses as hobbies, right? So that's not to discredit or disregard that aspect, but the hope for the business is that it creates value and creates a revenue, creates a livelihood for yourself. And so oftentimes the place you started at within your business isn't necessarily always the one that you end up with. So eventually, even though you might be a really great chef, in order to create that strong, consistent livelihood, you may not always end up being the person creating every dish. And that can be a little hard to swallow for folks, but the more time you spend to really think about building the business, the more ability you'll have to be creative as the concept or as your venture becomes more stable. And so just food for thought, not trying to discourage anybody from doing anything, but I do think that it's important to distinguish how we get to certain places. And then finally, this last consideration, and this may be a really hard one to evaluate for many people, is this idea that expenses should equal revenues. And I don't mean that in an accounting sense necessarily, but what I do mean is that if you spend money on something, ideally you should have that money spent should have a purpose, and that purpose ideally should turn into a revenue or a positive or some sort of benefit for the business that will generate additional income. And this is really important to understand because sometimes, I understand it as somebody that's been in business in a few different ways. Sometimes, we can get caught up in the moments and purchase something thinking that, oh, we're going to use it at some point, and then we never do, and we miss out on the value that we are hoping to get. Or at other times, we maybe only quickly look at the opportunity that exists, maybe not look at it with enough of the finer details or finer points of evaluation, and we make a purchase that ends up not being necessarily the best for the business, right? And if you're thinking about this in terms of hiring a contractor or hiring a new employee, this is really, I think, one of the most important considerations that you can make in identifying whether or not that person or position should be filled at all, is whether or not bringing that set of skills or talent into the organization will help you drive more revenue. Also understand that sometimes it may be a little difficult to see it directly. For example, if you have a person that's managing your accounting, you're spending money for them to manage your accounting. That doesn't necessarily, if you think about things in a very literal sense, it doesn't necessarily seem like you're making money off of that expenditure. But it's the money, going back to the opportunity cost, it's the money that you're making not having to focus on that particular task that helps you create more revenue. So even if the position doesn't directly bring in sales, like a salesperson, you would think if I hire another salesperson, obviously I'm going to have more revenue, or that would be the hope. Some positions that you hire for may not necessarily have that one-to-one equation. So thinking about it in terms of these three considerations, or these three main considerations, I think is really sort of the starting block of, do I need somebody to do this for me? As you also think about, do I need somebody to do this for me? A lot of people like this idea of bootstrapping. And so I'm gonna hopefully jump into that if I can. Yeah, there we go. Like this idea of bootstrapping, which is the idea that you pretty much are trying to do everything or build everything without incurring any serious amount of debt or bringing in any sort of outside capital, or having any sort of, call it undue influence upon the business, like bringing in a partner that has more say than they should, or that you'd want them to. You're really trying to do this, as they say, by pulling yourself up from the bootstraps. And so there's a couple things to consider here. And I know that as business owners, we always try to look for the most effective, cost-effective, cheap, free, even ways of making do, or even trying to grow. And that's where that whole concept of bootstrapping comes into play. And so again, it relies heavily on the utilization of all available resources, getting the most out of the workforce that you have, the most out of the tools that you have. But oftentimes when we do these things, we look for the free tool versus the paid tool. We make those cost decisions without necessarily always looking at the value decisions. And sometimes getting the cheaper version doesn't always necessarily play out to have the same opportunity or benefit when you really look at the values that you are giving up. And so hopefully you can understand that off the top. I don't necessarily feel like I need to give an example there, but ideally that makes some sense to you. So the other thing that I think is important to understand is when you're thinking about making the most out of all of these tools, one of the most important aspects that you can consider is how to manage all of these tools, all of the resources that you currently have. Part of the inefficiency in many businesses, especially early stage, is you have a lot of disparate tools. You're using maybe Google Docs in one sense because it's cost effective or free. You're starting out with a Gmail account rather than getting your own hosted domain and specialized email address. You're managing invoicing through PayPal versus getting an integrated payment system. All of these trade-offs, while they do make some cost sense initially, they also represent an opportunity cost in the organization and the sort of brand recognition or synchronization of your company as a whole. And when you think about that as the consumer, you always want to put yourself in the mindset of the person that is going to be doing business with you. If the systems seem to be unorganized to you, how would they look in unison to the customer? So let's say that I go to your website, I want to purchase from you, and the way that I have to do that is articulated by sending you an email to, again, a non-correlating email address. So, if it was like John's, shoes.com, johnshoes.com, you go there and it just says, hey, if you like these shoes, email me, johnshoes@gmail.com. And then from there, I will send you a PayPal link for you to pay for them. And then if you fill out this Google form, I will get your contact information, and then I will send you all the stuff, right? Now, yes, that's free, or pretty close to free, or maybe even cost effective. However, when you put yourself in the shoes of your consumer, it sounds very discombobulating. It sounds unstructured. It might even bring about feelings of, call it anxiety or worry. Is this a legitimate process? Is this a legitimate business? And so there is that cost benefit analysis or cost opportunity cost in putting together a set of different resources that don't necessarily connect as integrated as they should. On the opposite side, I think it's also important to understand that you have in getting all of those things put together, there's a certain amount of time that you would expect things to live, right? So the reverse is, if I'm not bootstrapping, I'm paying somebody to do this for me, and I pay a bunch of money to a developer to build me a website and get me all the bells and whistles, and put it all together as I think that it should be built. But on the flip side, there's been very little customer interaction with that process. There's been very little on your side as the business owner, understanding of how the things that you build will work in unison together. And so, you have this great website, it gets built, and then all of a sudden it's released out into the world, and you realize you forgot to add certain aspects to it. Maybe you forgot to add the newsletter form, or you forgot to add, the shipping information. And you don't really understand what is going on from the technical aspects, because you just kind of handed it off to somebody. And so now, anytime that you need to introduce something new or make an edit, perhaps there is an associated cost of going back to that other person and paying them to update. And this is where I think we as entrepreneurs can start to get maybe a little bit disenchanted with the whole process, in that we think, oh man, this guy is charging me way too much. I can't believe it costs this much to do these certain things. And so we start to distrust the process of what we're getting, because it feels like it shouldn't be that complicated. Ideally, that makes some sense as well. So the best thing that you can do is, before you hire anybody or before you implement any specific tools, the best thing that you can do is to set a plan with objectives that can be evaluated. And what I mean by that is, if you are going to use a developer or a social media manager, or if you're going to use even a social media tool, or a different POS system, what is the goal of using that system, and how are you going to evaluate whether it is effective or not? If it saves you time, that might be an outcome that you're hoping for. Will utilizing this tool give me an extra hour to work on something else, or an extra 2? Or will hiring this person increase our online sales? Or will hiring this social media manager help me increase our online visibility, or our conversions from the social media platform to our website, or in-store foot traffic? All of those things need to have some sort of counterpoint that you can go back to and say, are we meeting our goals? Are we hitting the right notes? And do things seem to be coming together? Without that, you can very easily become almost like a filing system with no organization. And at that point, it's almost, you feel like you're running around with your hair on fire. What do you do now? So I think it's really important to have that set of planning and instruction set up ahead of time. Does anybody have any questions so far? Or comments?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Double check. All right, perfect. So I'm just going to keep going. And again, so when to hire, again, that all comes down to that idea of opportunity cost. What is investing in this hire, or investing in these set of tools or systems, what does that equate to in terms of a benefit? So use of available tools. And this is where I like to think about what is out there that's already available that might help me save time, save money that I might not have thought about before. And really what I'm trying to do here is show a middle ground between hiring a professional and I'm going to call it getting by. I'm not going to say it's necessarily the best set of systems, but also in evaluating whether you need to hire, it's also how much do you want to do personally, or how much can you do personally before it becomes ineffective for you to do that task, right? So remembering that if you don't know how to do something, I always like to think like, especially like if I'm working in a tool that I know has been around for a long time, for example, like Microsoft Excel. I don't know how many times, if you've ever used that tool before, you might have thought to yourself, there has to be an easier way. And I would say 9 times out of 10, there probably is an easier way, a set of functions or a specific set of resources within that program that would do the thing that you're trying to do and do it extremely quickly, but you just may not know how to do it yet, right? So that's where I always say, if you don't have an answer, Google is your best friend. There's no reason that you can't go looking for an answer first for many things or many problems that you have off the bat. Second to that, a lot of people don't necessarily know this, but the second most utilized search engine in the world is not necessarily Bing or anything like that, anything else like that. It's actually YouTube. And if, especially like for me trying to fix my old car, YouTube was like the greatest invention ever, because I can watch 48 other people show me how to fix the same problem that was on my car, maybe a different year and model, but it gives me the insight that I need, or the insight that I'm looking for, in order to try and do a better job. So I would say start with these 2 tools and try to figure out if somebody else is, call it quote unquote, crack the code for the problem that you are facing. A lot of times we either discount, discredit, or forget that these resources exist whenever you face a problem. If you're one of those people, and I know that sometimes I can be that person too, maybe just tape a little sticky note to your computer that says, did you Google it? I think that that's always a really valuable thing to consider, because oftentimes we can find ourselves in these sort of siloed holes that we've dug for ourselves, thinking that there's no solution and no one would ever understand our problem. But what we forget is that we're in an age where information is easy to access, or at least easier to access than it has been in any previous generation. And so utilizing those tools at hand can sometimes get you to a better point. If you don't know accounting, there are numerous videos and education, all free, that will show you how to do the accounting that you're looking for. If you don't understand how to do a specific process online, like, there are tons of resources, information that are at digestible levels that will help you understand how to use those things. So now I'm going to go into just a few different off-the-shelf tools you may or may not have heard about before, but these are sort of common solution problems that I can think you might want to hire somebody for. So if you're somewhere stuck between, I just don't know how to do this myself, and maybe I should hire somebody to do this. If you haven't tried doing it yourself, then I would recommend maybe taking a look at some of the off-the-shelf tools first, if you believe you have enough time and capacity to make the effort to invest into it. So a few just major tools that you can utilize in terms of business visibility. If you haven't already gotten your website online, there are some really great off-the-shelf, easy to use, drag and drop type tools with a lot of user support, meaning like education videos that are free, that'll show you how to build these systems. Shopify is one, especially if you're selling things or want to sell things online. Shopify, I think, is a really great tool. It's really cost effective. Usually starting out, it's somewhere around $20 a month. And it's just really intuitive and easy to set up. So that's one that I recommend. Squarespace is another one that's pretty easy for people to use. The pricing runs about the same, more or less. And Wix is another one that's, I would say, more articulated towards showing off services rather than necessarily selling directly through them. But if you're just looking for a way to say, hey, we exist, and look at our stuff, or here's where we're located, or this is what our menu is like. Wix or Squarespace are pretty good tools, and they're really cost effective, rather than paying somebody somewhere in the realm of at the lowest end I can think about for somebody to build you a more custom solution, $1,500. Although realistically, those prices can go up considerably depending on how custom you're looking to get. And then other tools that save time. So I know on the social media side, that can always seem really daunting, especially now. You think it seems like every year there's a new social media site that you're wondering, do I have to invest in this particular tool? Are my customers going to come from there? What do I build, right? And so luckily there are a few management tools that exist that are, again, either free to start or at a very cost-effective level that will help you schedule and manage to some of these specific tasks, right? So if you find yourself in that position where you just need something that'll help you save time rather than you having to be physically behind the phone or on the computer at the exact moment when you want to post, using a tool like a Buffer or a Hootsuite, which are both social media scheduling platforms, can help you increase the time that you spend, or decrease the time that you spend managing to these specific tasks. Now, if you find yourself sitting there thinking like, I don't even know what would be good content, that is a harder question to solve for. And it might require maybe at least initially strategy from a consultant or something else. But we can go into that in a little bit. So there are other tools out there. I've only mentioned these two because I've tangibly used them before. They are relatively simple to use, and I don't think that they take much time to learn. But it's also, and I'll kind of cover this at the very end of this slide, but it's also important, again, to go back to what is your customer, or what is the consumer that you're trying to attract? What do they actually care about? And is what you're doing necessary to meet them where they are? So other tools, so tools that can boost your ability and your creativity. Like a lot of small businesses struggle with creating aesthetically pleasing ads or graphically pleasing ads, or just even visuals. There are some really great tools that are available these days to build out these tools or statements or collateral, and I would recommend you taking a look at them. Canva is an extremely valuable tool, and it basically is almost like a drag and drop editor for any sort of visual design. It has a lot of the aspects where you can even pre-format images to make the specific dimensions that you need for, let's say it's Facebook ads or Instagram or any other sort of thing, banners, even printables that you might want to send to a printer. That again is meant to be user friendly so that you don't end up having to spend a ton of time or a lot of money with a creative artist or a graphic designer, unless you feel like it's a necessity. The trade-off there, when you think about on things on a more graphical end, is that you're sacrificing not only your time in that sense, but you're also making the assumption that you might have the best knowledge of how to relate to your customers, whereas a graphic designer, and when I say designer, I'll stipulate that's different from graphic artist. Their goal is to really understand and innately understand what your customer and audience is supposed to be and how they act, and then creating something that is a custom solution to help relate that set of information towards your audience. So I'll get back into that in a minute as well. So if you feel like you understand your customer and audience extremely well, maybe it's a good bet for you to use the tool. But if you feel like you know nothing, again, then maybe it's, again, worth a conversation or a consultation or even management by somebody else. And then finally, tools that can help your communication, things like MailChimp, Drip, Constant Contact. If you're looking to create better lines of communication to your customers, these platforms are really great for newsletters. Again, they're really great for drag and drop capability. You want to have tools that really help you align what you're doing with the customer and what they want. So these are a few different tools that I wanted to bring up. There are obviously many other tools that you can use even for many other problems. These are just a few that I know that people seem to struggle with. If you're not a writer, then obviously you're going to probably want to see about getting somebody to write for you, or finding somebody within your organization that might have that talent or free time, or finding a partner that might aid you with that element as well. So it's important to know what tools and resources that you have around you as well, that aren't just digital resources, that might be human resources, that also might not necessarily be associated with your company, but maybe y'all have a symbiotic relationship where you refer clients to somebody and they refer clients to you at times. Maybe there's a way to have sort of a mutual share of what you can do. Maybe they're a better writer, you're better with graphics. Y'all can share efforts just like you would share clients, and now you have other available tools and resources that also help you free up time. So again, I wanted to just quickly touch on this this point I made earlier, which is about understanding who your audience is and how to relate to them. This is something that I think initially we may think we understand as business owners. I mean, whatever that first sale was, you sort of look at your audience and you say, wow, okay, I made that first sale. And the money sort of makes you glossy-eyed, I think, a little bit, if you're able to get there. And then, I always give this example, and I think it's a very common example. If I was to ask you, who is your audience? And I ask this a lot to people in the food industry, who is your audience? It's a very common early response to have somebody turn around and say, well, everybody's my audience, right? Well, that might be true, that you can absolutely have clients at any age, from any background. That isn't necessarily the specific person or specific audience that you're trying to reach, right? If you open up if you open up a gluten-free bakery, yes, anybody can technically enjoy gluten-free products. However, the specific person that you're trying to sell to is somebody that maybe has a gluten intolerance or celiac disease or something like that. That might be your preferred customer. And that might be the initial reason that you got into this particular line of business. What does the age of the person look like? You might be able to say, well, it spans from 20 to 80 years old. And again, while that might be true, understanding your audience to a point and even identifying, building a picture of who they are will help you make the most sense of what you need to do as well within your business to assure that you're aligning with them. This is a more extremely important component when you think about marketing to your customer. If your audience happens to be in that sort of 18 to 25 range, the best, a couple of the best platforms for social media might end up being something like TikTok or Instagram. Those are relatively popular engagement platforms for younger people, versus if your audience is likely between the ages of 35 and 55, the most likely social media platform that you're going to want to try to take a look at may be Facebook. So understanding what your audience does, looks like, how they want to purchase, what backgrounds they have, really painting a picture of who that is will also help you refine what you need to do to get to them, what tools that are available to you to get to them, and also help you maybe clean up what you're doing right now for example, if you are using, 5 different social media platforms, you think about it a little bit more constructively and realize the majority of your audience, your preferred clientele, is, in a specific demographic range, and it turns out they're most likely online, using these 1 or 2 platforms, then maybe you can cut out the other 3 and save yourself the money and potentially the cost of hiring somebody to manage all of those tools, and then just focus on managing just those 1 or 2 really well. So that's another, just kind of a big point I want to make is understand your audience first. There are many reasons that you don't need to do a lot of things that we're commonly sort of broadly told, just because in general it may be decent advice, but on your specific level it may not be as relatable as otherwise. So I know I just gave a lot of information about that. Does anyone have any questions while I catch my breath? And
No, I don't have any question. I just have a, well, in the past, I used to use Hootsuite
okay.
to save time. But what I realized is that you miss sometimes, like, you miss the, how can I say? You miss the contact, or you missed the interaction with your customer.
With your customer, okay.
Yeah. So how can we avoid missing the contact or the interaction and saving time? I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what platform are you primarily using, or do you have many platforms? Meaning social media platforms.
Right now, I'm not using anyone, but in the past, I used to use Facebook and Twitter.
Okay.
And right now, I'm planning to use just Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. So one of the great features within Facebook and Instagram, especially if you have a business page or just a page in general, they've instituted sort of this messenger feature for businesses. So I don't know if you've been to a Facebook page for a business recently, but sometimes you'll have the chat feature pop up and it'll say, do you have any questions, or is there anything you'd like to know? And you can actually preset questions and answers, sort of like an FAQ for those interactions. So let's say that you miss a customer, or a customer wants to engage with you after hours. They want to know, how much does your service cost, or when are you open, or can we schedule a meeting or something like that. By filling out your profile to include those instant messages, and really filling it out to think about the questions you're commonly asked or the engagements that you are likely to get, that can help you save some time and not miss the interaction in its entirety. For Launch SA, if you go to our Launch SA page on Facebook, those questions are already there. And so if you reach us after hours and we're not paying attention to the chat because nobody's technically working at that time, then it will automatically tell you, hey, our hours of operation are from 9 to 5. We will get back to you as soon as possible once we're back in the office. And so it leaves them with the sense maybe that you're not going to get seen immediately, but it leaves them with the sense that they will be interacted with at a certain point. So you can also make a workflow for those questions to where either you can, again, answer questions about your business that are going to be frequently asked, such as, what are the costs? Do you go to this particular area? Elements like that. Or, is there, can I schedule a meeting? Something like that. That I think would be more productive, and it helps you create a standard process and a workflow using a tool within the system itself, that you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of additional resources specifically managing. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully that's useful. Now, granted, there are probably other ways, and depending on what value that you see from those interactions, for example, if you can correlate that, if a person talks to a customer, the likelihood of closing a sale is 80%, right?
Mhm.
Then the remainder, or the cost benefit analysis, if you will, for hiring somebody else is, well, how many sales am I going, or like how many sales have I missed out on because I wasn't available to chat at that moment? And if you can tell that there's a considerable amount of sales that you're missing because you're not engaging with those customers then and there, then maybe it makes sense to have somebody manage it more consistently. If you realize like the inflow of customers from those platforms doesn't necessarily translate into sales, then maybe it's something that you put down your list for something to invest in at a later date. Or if you're thinking about refocusing on a particular outlet to get more sales, then maybe it's worth spending the time working with a consultant to help you build out a better strategy that helps you create stronger engagements that lead to conversions and sales. And so hopefully that's like 3 different kind of concepts there, but ideally that makes a little bit more sense just in terms of making that choice and evaluation. Because not all the time, like there's usually a deeper question or a deeper set of data that if you look at, you'll say, I do get, 4 to 5 clients trying to interact with us an hour through this platform. Even when I was there, I never really got that many sales, so is it worth putting more effort into it? Or is it, I wasn't articulating the answers to them well enough that they were converting on the sales? So is it a change of language or communication? Or I really don't get any visibility on my social media platforms. So how do I increase that engagement? What do I change about my content or about how I'm addressing people or the visuals that are on my platforms that help articulate something better to them? So I think there's a few different aspects to consider, but there usually are some built-in tools that help you alleviate at least some of those communication concerns within the platforms at this point now. So hopefully that provides a little bit of background. I only have a few more slides. I don't know where we are on time, but I want to make sure that I address everything that you guys have. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to interrupt me. And if you're watching this on Facebook Live, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I will make sure to go back and look at that and provide some insight if I can. So I get the next, important point or road, just call it stop, block, whatever you want to say, that we're going to run into is, I've realized that there's an opportunity here. I cannot take advantage of it. I don't have the time, or my time would be spent better somewhere else, or the available tools that exist are maybe not either intuitive enough for me, or any number of reasons, feel like, the benefit is going to be there in hiring somebody else to do this work. And so I've kind of come up with a few different basic ideas that'll help you understand whether or not it's worth, or how to evaluate whether or not somebody is specifically the right fit for your business. So the first thing I think, which is the most important thing to understand, is what you're asking for. And so they're understanding the terminology, understanding the specific role or title that somebody is given themselves, I think that's going to go far in helping you understand what not only maybe the costs might be, but also what value that you're going to get returned. And so I've given a few examples here, designer versus graphic artist. And I sort of, at the beginning or earlier in the presentation, I sort of started to talk about the distinction between the two, specifically for graphic artist versus designer. And when you think about a designer almost is like an architect, like they're building for a specific purpose. They're trying to think through all the different use case scenarios. They're trying to make sure that the ease of use is easy, you know, that it's easily implementable, that it's articulate to the end user, you know, that it's not going to be something that doesn't work for the final person, versus a graphic artist, which is somebody that's really sort of building tools for the time, right? And they're not necessarily the people that design the plans. They're not the people that do all of the legwork to understand, you know, what needs to be built. They're just really like the construction worker, if you will. They know how to build the thing. They don't necessarily know how to make the plan. And so in understanding that, if you feel like you're extremely articulate in understanding everything about your customer, and you know what's best, and you're you know, extremely knowledgeable about how and what all of your brand or elements should look and feel like, then perhaps you can articulate to a graphic artist what they need to do or what elements they need to build you in order for you to succeed. Essentially, that puts the role of architect in your hands, or designer in your hands versus their hands. So, you know, if I know that my audience, like, you know, for Launch SA, the thing that's going to really help relate the value of what I do to them, fictional example is a light bulb. Like, you know, hey, come to us with ideas. You know, our logo should be a light bulb because light bulb means idea. And I know, based on the research that I have or the data that I've collected, that people are going to relate to that that specific element really well, and it's going to help me, you know, be easily identified by my market. Well, then I can just have a graphic artist make me a light bulb, right? Now, how they make that light bulb, you know, I would have to give them all the specs and data and information and color schemes, and really almost project manage the entire build to get the right end product. Versus a designer. A designer should go through that whole discovery process with you to understand who you are, what you're doing, what you're trying to relate, what nuances that you have about your business, your person, your customers, all of those things, all of the maybe the stuff that you might not have spent enough time on reviewing. And they're going to make the recommendations that, you know, really, light bulbs are sort of ubiquitous, and, you know, everybody thinks, you know, light bulb, but it's just going to be forgotten by the wayside. You know, what we're going to do is, you know, we think that a rock would be the best articulation of what you're doing, because you're a rock in the community. And, you know, every one of your customers has said in our customer discovery that, you know, Launch SA is really the rock of the community. They hold us down. They, you know, build us together. They're strong, whatever that is, right? But they're going to go through that entire process, and they're going to help articulate a more developed answer to the question of what you should be doing. One has a higher cost than the other. Generally, a graphic artist is going to be far less expensive than going to a designer. But again, if you don't know what you're doing, then simply handing off the instructions to have something built when you're not 100% sure what you're building as well, then you'll end up with just something generic or maybe misaligned with what your goals are. Another flip or example of that would be a manager versus a strategist or consultant. These terms kind of come out a few different ways. If you're asking somebody to manage to something, then ideally they're taking a hold of the entire reins of the project. They're actually doing the implementation. For example, a social media manager versus social media strategist. A strategist might help you understand or build what that language should look like, or how to best communicate with your audience, versus a manager, which might do all of the implementation for you. And if you're working with a social media company specifically, they might have both elements of this particular process within their product suite. So they may offer both the strategy and the implementation, which is obviously going to be the most expensive component, is having somebody do both. If you feel you can handle all of it, then maybe you just need the strategy. If you feel like you have the strategy, but you don't really have the time, then maybe you just need a manager. In either scenario, it's good to understand what you're looking for, what you're asking for, because that's going to end up dictating the costs and the deliverables. So other things, and I mentioned this earlier, I'm going to say it again. Setting goals and outcomes for any potential project is one of the most crucial things that you can do for your business. Remember that you're the customer at the end of the day. I think a lot of times when we end up putting ourselves in the consumer position, even though we might be business owners, we sometimes forget that we have some say and choice in what goes on. But also understand your limitations, as I did talk about earlier, in that if you know that you don't really know what's going on, then have the person that you're hiring lead. But when I say that you're the customer, you control to a degree what outcomes you hope for or are seeking, what likely deliverables that you would want. And so you need to make it known if there are specific outcomes or deliverables that you need or that are a necessity for you. Those need to be articulated in the process of hiring, or even the identification of a particular contractor, fulfiller, or employee. Otherwise, you may be handing off a project to somebody, and they may do the work, but without anything to correspond how that work has affected your business, you may not ever understand whether or not you were successful. Oftentimes, I think that we can look back at projects and say, man, I feel like I got no value out of working with that person. But in truth, you got exactly the value that you paid for, because the objectives you were hoping to get were never clearly stated and articulated for the person doing the work to understand. And so setting those goals, setting that expectation up front, making that a part of the contract or the language or the fulfillment, I think is important. That way you can, again, go back at the end of the day and say, you didn't end up helping me increase my visibility by 5%. Instead, I only got 1%, or in fact, I got 0%. I don't think that y'all did a good job on this. Is there something else that we can do? Or is there a remedy that you have for this? Because, you stated you would be able to do this, and that's what we had as the outcome or the goal. So it's important to understand and make sure those communications are clear. Also consider instituting elements of reward in the payment system. And again, that always has to be mutually agreed on. But in the construction world, sometimes there are opportunities where you can say, if you get this project finished within X amount of time early, then we can increase your pay by X%, right? or we can bonus that. Or if you hit these goals that are sort of on a sliding scale, like our goal is 5%, but if you hit 10, then we can increase, the bonus for that. It incentivizes the contractor to potentially, or the employee or whoever, to potentially go above and beyond, or make a better effort to attempt to reach the goals that you had set out or were hoping for at the beginning. So there's no reason you can't. People always say, you never get what you don't ask for. So it's good to remember you're the customer, so you can ask and they can tell you no, but you can always ask. And then again, understanding what you pay for. So if you don't know what you're agreeing on, if you don't know what the outcomes are going to be, or if you have no defined outcomes, then you're likely not to have a good experience. And if you do, it's probably going to be more happenstance than anything. You can also ask for references from past clients. I know that we can sometimes be swayed by going to a website and seeing big name brands or big name clients on the website, or big name or visible projects on the website, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the outcomes manifested to be what the client was hoping for. That just means that they did the work. And it's possible. I'm not going to say that there are untrustable or untrustworthy business owners out there, but it is also possible that their work may have been overstated, or just may even to you seem overstated. It's always good to ask for reference and clarify that what was asked for, what was delivered was good. And it's also a good point in understanding what you're getting. I know that in a personal hiring scenario, sometimes people can overlook references, but they're a really great way to understand what you're getting yourself into and evaluating who you're going to be working with. The last point I want to make here, which I think should pretty much go, I didn't want to overly state it, but I think it should be somewhat commonplace. But just in case anybody thinks or didn't think of this before, any relationship that you have with somebody that's going to be doing work for you should be one that you feel like you can have an honest conversation with. That somebody that you can relate with, somebody that understands what you're doing, that is a good fit. Some people like to say, somebody that you can have a beer with, quote unquote. I don't know that it necessarily needs to go that far. I don't know that you need to be exact friends, but just understanding that you're going to be on the same page, that your communication styles map out well, that can go a long way in a good working relationship. Even if somebody may seem like they're more qualified, if you're unable to have call it a good conversation or a good understanding or good relatability, then they may not necessarily be the best fit for you, even though they may seem very qualified. So it's important to understand that those points of relatability as well. Ideally, these key markers will help you kind of think through that process as well. And then, so this is the hard part, right? So if we've gotten through, I think this person seems like the right person, they seem knowledgeable, they've been able to relate the information really well to me, the guidelines or the outcomes or, what I'm paying for seems to be exactly what I'm hoping for. Then how do we figure out what it should cost? And this is where the sticker shock can come in on a few different things. But then this is also where people can overprice what they're actually doing for you. And when I say overprice, I mean, all of that is relative, right? Because somebody may have a very strong background. I think this is harder to understand when things seem easy to you, quote unquote. Like when you're looking for somebody to make you a logo, the idea that the price range on something like that can go from, $1,000 to $20,000 may seem like wildly incomparable. But the knowledge, the time that somebody has spent to hone their craft, the amount of inputs that they need, or customer discovery or interaction or any sort of build out, define and redefine processes that they have to go through. Those all have cost and time considerations that are very important. So that, you know, the $20,000 may be easily justifiable when you put all of those factors together, versus the $1,000 cost, which may very well be, you asked for a light bulb and I gave you a light bulb, and, you know, here it's $1,000. So you know, understand that these things can vary, but there are a lot of external factors that go into pricing. These things aren't just arbitrarily made up. The end person may also have a belief that their value is a certain point, and again, that's going to be left up to you as the consumer to say that the value that they have or bring to the table is going to be worth the price that they're stating. If you know that they've made the brands for, you know, Coca-Cola and Pepsi and, you know, a bunch of different brands, well, if your brand is also like a Coca-Cola or Pepsi and it needs that, you know, very large brand consideration because the footprint is so huge, then yeah, maybe that's the right person. But if you're hiring somebody that's done that work and you're just a burgeoning brand with, you know, only, you know, notoriety within, you know, one zip code, then, you know, not only are they probably going to be more expensive, but they may also not necessarily be the right fit because they may have had less time working with smaller brands, helping them build up. So just kind of think about these things. Even though the person may have managed, you know, the social media for Whataburger, are you Whataburger? And is that the audience that you're trying to relate to? So understand these things can have variability. So in thinking about what do you want to, how much does this cost? I think you should always start with a budget. And how do you really define what that budget should look like? Well, what would it cost you to hire somebody to do this in-house? And that consideration should be how much time that you're doing it, how much time you think that you would be spending to pay somebody to do it. For example, if you were to hire an in-house social media manager, you know, maybe is that a $15 an hour job? Is that a $20 an hour job? Does that person have to have a bachelor's degree in communications? What kind of proof or background did they have to have before you would say that hire is worth something, or that they may have the right background for them to be considered? You know, how much experience do you think that they would need to have? It's almost like writing your own job description. But when you start putting it together, you realize all of these factors come at varying costs. And is this person going to be on an hourly basis, a full-time or part-time basis? Or are they just a contractor? Would they be paid a salary? Are you going to be including benefits into that? If this person at the upper end is a full-time salaried person with a bachelor's degree in communications, you know, let's say that runs you $40,000 to $50,000 on an annual basis. Is it going to be more cost effective to spend $40,000 to $50,000 with a contractor or with a company that does that role or manages to that role than it would be for you to fulfill that role in-house? If that's the only thing that they're doing, is that the best use of your money for that particular role? So a lot of considerations to be made on what that can cost. Now, if you believe on the lower end, you know, hey, I think this is like a 10-hour a week job or a 10-hour a month job even, and, you know, I'd probably pay somebody $20 an hour for that, then, you know, maybe that time is better spent on hiring maybe an intern, or actually hiring a part-time person or social media manager, or even a company that's a small company, an individual that provides these services, versus hiring a larger firm to manage it for you. So those are important things to consider, but it'll help you kind of create what likely you should be spending on this particular role. If it's harder to understand, then I would also say it's important to include what you would do with this additional time. So if you know that maybe this is like your first hire or your first additional person that you're bringing in, and you're spending 20 or 30% of your available time on the accumulation of those duties or that role. Maybe you're really good at it, maybe you're not, maybe you're just okay at it. Then I would say it's important to include the value of your time into that decision as well. Because your time as the owner should always be more expensive than the person that it costs you to replace yourself in that role. Ideally. Now, granted, some people are extremely specialized and may have extremely great specific tool sets or skill sets. So maybe they're better suited and they would cost more in that role. At that point, then you need to think about that next component, which is what is the value of the outcome to your business? And this is where you can look at something and say, if we have better branding, that'll lead to better sales, or at least that's the identified hope or outcome or goal that you're stating. Or if you have more consistent social media messaging, then ideally you have increased customer traffic, whether that's online or whether that's in person, but that's what you're evaluating on. And so over time, you can say, yes, this person worked out, or this seemed to be a good cost analysis. Like I've been able to get 80% conversions on social media now that I have somebody dedicated to it full time. And, I can only really tangibly expect to pay this much just because of the value that I'm getting in return. And you can maybe then, again, using the reward system, put in incentives that help people get to higher conversion points or higher return points, making it valuable for both people to spend more effort, more money on the return that they get. So that, I think, these are some really important considerations when you're thinking about getting somebody else to do the work in terms of cost. So the final slide, or the second to last slide that I have, is finding better recommendations. One of the things that I did leave off of here, and I wanted to bring up, because I did remember it just now, is this idea of sort of, what do they call them? Fractional roles within your company. So you may not be able to afford a chief financial officer, somebody that can help you really dig into your financial position, how your sales are doing, make recommendations on how to improve sales or where to cut costs. That person may be an extremely expensive hire to bring in. However, there are many individuals, companies, organizations that offer fractional usage of their time for your business. So let's say that you couldn't afford bringing in a CFO on your own, but you can hire somebody on a fractional basis. Maybe it's 5 hours a month or 10 hours a month at a much discounted rate in terms of not having to pay $100,000, but rather paying $2,000 a month to get the same insights for your business. And there are a number of organizations that can do that. Or maybe you're not, you don't have the ability to hire the best consultant on a monthly basis to give you the insights that you need. However, there are many different resources that you can use. One of which is a online resource called what is it called now? It used to be called Odesk, and now it's called, oh man, I'm totally blanking on it. So broadly, there are many freelancer websites that are available for you to utilize, where you can find people of extremely high skill sets that are working on an hourly or a project related basis, or maybe have the talent in other countries, and they're looking for additional work, just anywhere they can find it. You might be able to find somebody that is living in Mexico or Canada that would be willing to provide you the same services at a more cost-effective rate for you, through one of these websites. And so if you're interested in looking into those, I know if you look up freelancers online, you'll get the first 5 links will guaranteed be websites that you can do work like this. I know one of them used to be called Odesk. I can't remember what it's called anymore, but I would encourage you to take a look at them. They may be able to help you find extremely great talent at an hourly basis, or at a project basis, or at a cost-effective rate based on conversions that works out well for you. And it's even a better benefit if you actually know another language. For example, if you knew Hindi and you were familiar with sort of the Indian business market, you may be able to find somebody that speaks the same language that you can communicate with, that might be able to provide you better or similar quality work at a more cost-effective rate for your business. Those are just tools that exist. I'm just letting you know. Other things that are important. So ask your respected peers for recommendations. I know oftentimes we can sort of, again, think about this in a very singular viewpoint. Who exists out there to do this? But if you have peers, other entrepreneurs, and a community around you, maybe it's Facebook groups that you're a part of, or maybe it's community groups that you're a part of, ask them, who do you use, or who would you recommend for this particular project, or who do you think has good insight on these particular items? And start a conversation off with those recommendations and see if they match to some of the other components I mentioned earlier. Find out who your competitors are using. I think that's always like a good marker. If you think that your competitors are doing really well, and better yet, if you know that they're doing really well financially, because sometimes what you see is not always what exists or what you get. If you can verify that the projects or the outcomes that they're getting are good, there's no reason that you cannot work with the same providers that they're working with. Or if those providers have keen insight and expertise, then maybe they're best suited, and that's another reason for you to utilize them. And then finally, utilize your community. So Launch SA, we work with many different providers. We have numerous mentors that have experience in all industries and all stages and providing all different types of services. Worst case scenario, or even best case scenario, you can start with us and let us know what you're struggling with, and we can provide you insights, direction, connections, mentorship to any of those solutions or needs that you are seeking or looking for. So that is what I had. That is when to hire for digital resources, or when I think that was the name. Like at this point, I'm like, my mouth is dry. So does anyone have any questions or comments? Was this valuable to you? Is there anything else that I can ideally shed or illuminate for anybody listening or otherwise?
No, thank you. I don't have any questions.
Perfect.
Hi, Ryan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, this is Jason Jargi. I was on one of your last meetings before. I was wondering how I go about setting up an appointment to come in and speak to y'all about our different issues that are going on.
Yeah, so what I would recommend is just send us an email at team@launchsa.org. And from there, we can schedule a time with you. Right now, we're not meeting in person, but we are doing video conference calls and phone calls as well. So we'd be more than happy at your convenience to meet. I believe that, yeah, go ahead.
I'm putting the Calendly link on the chat.
Okay, and yeah, and if you are able to see the chat for this discussion, then you can utilize our calendar booking system that Daniela just dropped into the chat, and you can book some time with us whenever is convenient for you.
I actually can't see it. I'm listening in.
Okay, well, feel free,
But-
team@launchsa.org, and we can send you the link there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions or comments or anything else that we can support?
No, everything is clear.
Perfect. Well, I hope that there was some value here. Daniela, are you able to take a look at the Facebook? Was there anything there?
Yes, there's nothing there, but I also put the link in that chat as well.
Okay, perfect. So, well, if nothing else, folks, I really hope that there was some value here. As I mentioned before, and always, think about Launch SA. Consider us your first friend, first stop in this business journey. Wherever you get stuck, just let us know. It's not simply, you know, a one-time, one-size-fits-all equation for anybody. It's always a working relationship. It's always an ongoing and evolving conversation. So wherever you get stuck or hung up, just let us know, and we will happily provide you what we think are the best sets of next steps for you to move forward. So thank you all for your attention, spending the time with us this afternoon. And again, if there's anything that we can do, feel free to get connected with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan, for everything. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm going to go ahead and close this chat. And if you need anything else, again, team@launchsa.org. Thank you.